guys, I hope you're doing well. If you don't know, my name's Brittany and I film videos based around the paranormal and mythological beings. So if that's something that you think might interest you, go ahead and quickly click that subscribe button and we're gonna dive right into the topic. So today's topic I am so excited to talk about because it is something that is very important to me, and that is the fairy realm. So actually fairies in general. A lot of people think that, so everybody knows what the depiction of a fairy is. It's a little humanoid being with wings. However, some people don't realize that fairies is actually a universal term for all of the creatures that reside in the fairy realm. So we're going to dive a little bit into that. There are a ton of different myths around fairies and where they came from. So in Ireland, some people say that fairies are actually fallen gods called the Tuatha De Danann. These gods and goddesses are said to live underground in a world that is separate than ours. The fairies would enter and exit our realm through hills known as fairy mounds, which would be so cool to see. I would love to see a fairy mound. However, the church then demonized the belief of fairies and the old gods, and the beliefs of fairies were actually outlawed. Parts of the world, along with some people in Ireland, people believe that fairies are spirits of nature. That fairies are guardians of places like trees and rivers, lakes, and so on. Sometimes these spirits can actually manifest into physical forms like pixies and gnomes, dwarfs, elves. And an oral tradition from medieval times actually says that fairies are the spirits of lost pagans who died before the birth of Christ. The beliefs of fairies were so widespread throughout Ireland that there was a case in the early 1900s where a man actually killed his wife because he believed that a fairy took her and there was a fairy there in her place. This was actually a very common concept. It's referred to as a channeling, and it's basically where a fairy takes the person, or it's more so common with children or babies, but the fairy actually takes it and replaces the person with either a log or even a fairy themselves. People would actually place milk, cream, or butter on their steps certain days of the year to appease the fairies. And farmers would keep their either last crop of the year or their first crop of the year. And it was said that if they didn't do this for the fairies, that bad luck was sure to fall on them. Traditions are not just from long ago. Some of them actually survive today. Now, in Scotland, the belief of the house fairy known as a brownie is still very prominent. These were small, stout creatures who would actually live in a person's home, and they usually attach themselves to one specific family, but they would help the family with chores while the family was asleep. They were very helpful, benevolent fairies, and they were said to have a close connection with the rooster. It's thought that they traveled from Scotland with Scottish immigrants in the early 17th century to US and Canada. Now, it's not often that you would find a brownie living in a modern or new home. They are more likely to be attached to the original Scottish family. However, some Scottish Americans claim to have brought a fairy into their home using different offerings or tactics. Now, elves come from Scandinavian folklore and legends. Now, according to the Prose Edda, which is a medieval work of literature, there are two types of elves, light and dark. In America, elves are known to be very earthly beings, typically seen dressed in green. There are said to be green elves, where their skin actually is green, and they're sometimes known to wear green caps. The green elves that have been seen in America are often a little shorter in height, and they're often encountered on the edges of graveyards or forest. So these beings actually live in trees. So they want to protect the trees. They want to protect the wildlife. In Ireland, they're seen near ancient burial mounds, which could somehow indicate their connection to the dead, or it could say that fairyland is actually underground. Now, the Tantra is another form of house fairy. It's said that they were brought to America by Finnish immigrants. So just like the brownie is attracted to Scottish immigrants, the Tantra is attracted to Finnish immigrants that settled here. Now, the difference between a Tantra and a brownie is that the Tantra is a bit more mischievous. He will protect your home from invaders, both the spiritual and the physical kinds. However, he likes to play little tricks when he gets bored or irritated. One American woman actually claims to have small pebbles or jewelry thrown at her while in her bedroom. Now, the native Hawaiians actually have their own legends of little people called the Menehune. Now, the Menehune were small indigenous people that actually resided in Hawaii before the Tahitian people arrived. Hawaiian legend actually tells of these little people building certain sacred places on the island, such as ponds or mounds. They were thought to live in deep forests and valleys, and were roughly around 6 inches to 2 feet in height. Despite their small stature, the Menehune were actually able to build large structures overnight. Some claim to have seen the Menehune, but it's typically discredited because it's children, which I think is one of the most crediting sightings, because fairies are much more welcoming to children than they are to adults, because for centuries, adults have been the ones that judge them. They're the ones that call them evil. They're the ones that say that they don't exist, and children believe. Now, the Shoshone tribe believed in a race of tiny people that they called the Nimuragar. And that one I could have pronounced wrong. But anyways, the Nimuragar lived in the Rocky Mountains. They were known to be very aggressive towards outsiders. It was common that if anyone came near their territory, they would actually shoot them with poison-tip arrows. The San Pedro Mountain mummy called into question the legitimacy of the Shoshone's fairy legends. The mummy was a small being that was discovered in the mountains in 1932. However, the mummy's body actually disappeared in the 1950s. So there is no way of knowing whether that body was a fairy or not, because there's no longer a body. Now, the Cherokee tribe actually believed in 3 different groups of little people. There were the rock people, the laurel people, and the dogwood people. So each of them had their own personalities, their own temperaments, and they would teach the Cherokee certain lessons. The rock people would hurl rocks at anybody who got close to them. They were very territorial and aggressive. The laurel people were mischievous and liked to play tricks on people. And the dogwood people were very good-natured and known to help heal. Sprites and pixies are the ones that are commonly found around humans. They're not exactly the type of fairy that you would want in your home. They are always getting into trouble, and they really like to play tricks. So they would be the ones that are most likely to hide your objects on you and misplace them, or make them turn up in a place that you did not put them there. So it's best to try to keep those specific fairies towards your garden. And they love gardens. They love flowers. Now, the oldest families in Scotland, Ireland, and England tend to have fairies attached to them. Either the fairies will guard the property that these families own, or they will guard the families themselves. They are very loyal. In the late 1800s, an entire group of people actually saw fairies flying over. Now, the best thing for you to do would actually just wait until the fairy's ready to come out of hiding. And some of them may never come out of hiding, and they may never show themselves to you because they simply just don't trust humans. And this is because of centuries of humans calling them evil and just simply not believing in them. And you have to think about how awful some people treat nature. So they're not particularly a fan of humans. You can leave them an offering on the Celtic holy days. Some offerings include fairy bread, cupcakes, brownies, along with other sweets. They love sweets. And then there'd also be mead, milk, cream. It does take time though, so it's definitely not something that you're going to convince them overnight that you are trustworthy. A good thing to do though would be when you're alone, actually talk to the fairy. Give them a hello, let them know that you are a friend, and just kind of invite themselves to show themselves to you whenever they're ready. So, like, just don't pressure them. Now, there's a few different signs to see if a fairy may be in your home. So, one is the cat or dog starts acting strangely and starts playing with something that's not there. So then there's also food going missing without explanation. It's particularly sweets. Strange noises at night, along with furniture being jumped on, light footsteps, and tapping noises in closets. Closets really freak me out, so if there's a tapping noise, I probably want to go investigate. That's the one place that I would just kind of leave alone. Then there's doors opening and closing, chores in your home getting done without anybody's knowledge, jewelry or sparkly items going missing, then reappearing again in odd or obvious places. Milk or beer going bad before the expiration date. Seemingly poltergeist-like activity. And that depends on the fairy type. Which, if you watched my Elementals Part 2 video, that will actually tell you how you can kind of get rid of a fairy who is being malevolent. Then there's also new types of plants or vines growing around or outside of your home. Now, there's certain things that a fairy does not like. And if these things are happening in your home, it is much less likely that a fairy is going to come around you. So one would be loud, clanging wind chimes or bells. Another one would be loud, obnoxious children. Christian or Catholic paraphernalia, laziness, clergymen, and iron horseshoes. Bowls of salt, noise and commotion, lots of clutter and stale air. So iron is a huge one. So if you do have a malevolent fairy or spirit around you in general, iron is a great thing to keep around for that. However, some of the benevolent fairies and spirits can take offense to iron because it is something that they simply do not like. Well, I'm going to tell you about some things that fairies do like in a home. So they like houseplants, trees, flowers, something that shows that you're connected to nature. Shrines and altars to the old gods. Wine cellars, because if there's a leprechaun or a claricon. Urban flower gardens. Extra cabinet space for them to hide in. Fairy altars with offerings, which makes complete sense because they're fairies. But I want to know if you guys have had any experiences with any of the beings that I named. And if there's anything that you would like me to dive into, feel free to reach out to me. All of the info for that will be right down below. I would love to hear from you guys. Or you can simply just leave a comment right down below. And if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. It would mean so much to me. And if you could hit that subscribe button, I have so much coming your guys' way. So also hit that post notification button so you don't miss a single one. And with that being said, I hope that you guys are staying healthy and are enjoying the beautiful days that are coming our way. And I will see you guys next time.